Nobody told me what I was actually looking at. That's the part that still bothers me. I had been staring at the same data for weeks. Aerial surveys, topographical overlays, quarry output records going back to the 1940s. I was mapping transport routes, completely routine work. And then somewhere around the third week, my brain did something I couldn't undo. It stopped reading elevation data. It started recognizing anatomy. I want to be precise about what I mean by that, because the easy version of this idea sounds like a conspiracy theory, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in what the data actually shows when you remove the vocabulary we use to describe it. Because language is doing something very specific here. It's not just labeling things, it's deciding in advance what category of thing you're allowed to see. Here's an example. Go to any hardware store, find the bags of crushed white stone sold for landscaping. Read the label. It says limestone aggregate. That's the whole description. Limestone aggregate. 2 words: clean, industrial, geological. Now look up what limestone actually is. Calcium carbonate, compressed skeletal matter, shells, bone. The microstructure under magnification is identical to the interior matrix of a long bone, the same porous fractal architecture, the same density distribution. The chalk used on school blackboards comes from the White Cliffs of Dover. Hundreds of feet of crushed prehistoric skeleton, mined and pressed into sticks for children to write with. We accept that completely. It's taught in middle school. We are comfortable standing on compressed biological remains as long as the scale is small enough to ignore. The problem is that scale isn't fixed, and once I noticed that, I couldn't find the limit of where it stopped. Look at satellite imaging of the Zagros Mountains, or take a long drive through the ridges in Nevada and actually pay attention to the geometry. There's a pattern that emerges, a central ridge, thick, segmented, smaller symmetrical ridges branching outward and downward from both sides. We're taught to see tectonic folding, uplift, ancient erosion paths cut by water runoff over millions of years. But strip away the green, strip away the gray, look at the structure without the label. That's a spinal column, that's a ribcage, at a scale so vast that you can only read it from orbit. I kept telling myself that humans are wired to see patterns. We find faces in clouds. We impose biology onto random data because it makes the world feel legible. I told myself that repeatedly, but I kept going back to the comparative anatomy, and the deeper I went, the harder it got to look away. Because the overall shape is one thing. What broke my ability to dismiss this is the articulation. You find curved cliff faces with the exact internal porosity of a femur fractured at the marrow cavity. You find massive calcified structures in unmapped sections of the deep Sahara, revealed when the sand shifts, that don't behave like sedimentary rock. They don't test like sedimentary rock. They behave like vertebrae. When a biological structure is large enough that the human eye cannot resolve it from ground level, we don't have a category for it. So we use the only word that fits. We call it geology. And that word does enormous work. It ends the question before it starts. I sat in the university reading room until the lights flickered off. Textbooks on osteology stacked next to textbooks on geomorphology. Old glossy paper smell. The ventilation hum. I read the descriptions of calcium deposits in geological surveys and then read the equivalent descriptions in bone pathology studies. The language was different, the diagrams were the same. Now apply this to the underground. If you've been inside a large cave system, you know the sensation physically. The temperature drops, the air thickens, your voice doesn't bounce back the way it should. It gets absorbed. The official explanation is karst formation. Water finds a fracture in soluble rock, slowly dissolves it, and over millions of years a hollow chamber opens up. Blind, mechanical, geological. Then look at the cartography of Mammoth Cave, or Jewel Cave, or Wind Cave. Print out the full rendered map and lay it flat on a table. What you're looking at is not a random collection of voids. It is a vast three-dimensional network with a massive central arterial channel dividing into secondary passages, which divide again into tertiary tunnels, which taper outward into tight terminal fissures. Water, taking the path of least resistance, carves canyons. It pools. It breaches sidewalls. It does not generate perfectly distributed, symmetrical branching networks with consistent load distribution ratios across hundreds of miles of passage. I placed the speleological map of Wind Cave next to an anatomical diagram of the human pulmonary vein. I took a red pen and tried to find where the structural logic diverged. I was at it for a long time. The branching angles matched, the tapering ratios matched, the pressure distribution geometry matched. The walls of these systems are coated in red iron oxide. Iron, the elemental base of hemoglobin, the base of blood. Strip away the sanitizing vocabulary and the caves stop looking like geological accidents. They look like empty veins. The organic tissue petrified into mineral over an incomprehensible span of time, and what remains are the arteries. We walk through them with headlamps. We take photographs. That's when my sleep started going. It's one thing to look at a mountain and allow yourself a moment of imagination. You can always close the book. What you can't do is unsee the industrial infrastructure once you've looked at it the right way. Pull up aerial footage of the Bingham Canyon mine in Utah, an open pit 2.5 miles wide, nearly a mile deep, cut directly into the Zagros Mountains. The dump trucks operating inside it carry 300 tons per load, and they look like insects at the bottom. The air around it tastes like pulverized chalk. It settles on your teeth. The official record calls it copper extraction. You look at the footage and you see a surgical wound. We are not mining inert rock. If the structural analysis holds, what we are actually doing is performing an industrial autopsy. The explosions in the quarries aren't clearing earth. They're shattering joints. They're cracking open petrified marrow cavities so the interior material can be dragged to the surface and processed. The limestone goes to the kilns reduce it to powder. The powder becomes Portland cement, becomes concrete, becomes the foundations of federal buildings, highway infrastructure, the load-bearing cores of skyscrapers. You look at a city skyline and you see human engineering. Once you've done this long enough, you see something different. You see an ossuary. We took the mineralized remains of a biology we don't have a name for, ground it to dust, and built ourselves shelters from it. Every foundation, every pillar, every road, we live inside a reconstructed skeleton without knowing it. I tried to verify this with primary source data, deep core drill logs from before the major open pit operations began, the structural surveys taken before excavation, the records that show the physical arrangement of the strata in their original undisturbed state. Those logs are listed as public record with the National Geological Surveys. For the Chuquicamata pit in Chile and the Super pit in Western Australia, I spent 4 days trying to access the baseline structural surveys. The digital archives return error codes. The physical records at the university depositories are listed as permanently checked out or destroyed by water damage. Not redacted, not classified, just gone. Both of them, same description. I'm not making a claim about what that means. I'm noting that it's the kind of gap that would matter if the rest of the evidence holds. Because the open pit mines are getting deeper every year. The drills reach further down, and geologists describe the Earth's crust as a thin, brittle shell, a few dozen miles of rock cooling in space above a molten interior. If the mountains are structural bone, if the cave systems are vascular tissue, then the crust is not a geological layer, it is a biological one. The oldest layer of something we don't have a word for, and we are a younger organism that emerged from the rot, building everything we know from the harvested remains of whatever came before us. The decay is ongoing. The caverns keep hollowing out. The open pits get wider every decade. Tomorrow, step outside, look at the shoulder of any road, see the white crushed stone, drive through any mountain pass and look at the sheared cliff walls where the dynamite cut through, the red iron oxide bleeding down the rock face, the dark circular voids in the exposed white calcium strata. Listen to the sound gravel makes under your tires. That sound is structural decay. Something is still coming apart, slowly, at a scale we can't perceive from where we're standing. We didn't build civilization on the Earth, we built it on what the Earth used to be.